Welcome. What is up? Welcome to the Mixer. I'm your host, RC. I'm joined by my co-host here, Jeff. How you doing?
I'm doing good, man. Week's gotten off to a good start, so glad to be here.
Awesome. First things first, do not forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel or our podcast. We're on iTunes, Spotify, all the usual places. Follow us on social media. It's at FC Wine Mixer. We're going to be bringing you more Formula One content this time of year. So if you like F1, and check us out, continue to check us out. And we have a website, fcwinemixer.com. I'm going to be posting race reviews and maybe some Formula One DFS strategy, which did not go so well in as far as predictions and approach. But we'll get into that later. We gotta get to this tilt, Jeff. I gotta share this with you about what happened in this episode of Rob versus retail. Have you used Facebook Marketplace
I like once or twice, not very much, to be honest.
or Nextdoor? Any Craigslist? You've used
I've
Craigslist.
yeah, I've done Craigslist.
So Facebook Marketplace, same idea. It's like a online garage sale. I'm in the
Okay.
market for some cabinets. Been looking for cabinets. They're about $300 to $500 for what I need if you buy them fresh. You know, every now and then you see them on Facebook Marketplace, like $50, $100 or whatever. So I've been looking for months because I knew, I'm doing a redesign, or reconstruction, and I need cabinets. So I've been knowing that at some point I'm going to need them. Now I'm at the point where like I need them. I got to put them in. And
Okay.
so I saw this ad, free cabinets. It's a sink bottom, which is what I need. I'm like, sweet. Talk to the person, and the post is in Spanish, and you know, your amigo here sabe poquito español. So I'm messaging the person in Spanish, thinking I'm like freaking Mr. Worldwide, negotiating deals in other languages,
All right.
and set up a meet or whatever. First time around, they flake. They say, "Oh, we're not available after 4 or whatever. Come tomorrow at 10." I'm like, "Well, I'm freaking working at 10." So anyway, request for an extended lunch, and I go down there. It's not an insignificant drive. It's like 5 miles or whatever. Get down there, nobody's there. I can see the cabinets chilling. I'm like, all right, well, they're there. I'll wait. Messes the person, and it's like, oh, well, my husband's actually going. He's coming from Home Depot. He'll be there shortly. I'm like,
Mhm.
okay. So I wait like 20 minutes more, which is like about 40 minutes after the agreed time. Guy
Right.
shows up, opens the gate. I go in there. I'm like, are these them? Like, I start talking in Spanish, and he's just talking back to me in English. I was like, oh, okay, well, I guess we're going to have this conversation in English. Not that important, but so I go over there, and I'm like, all right, like, I'll just take him. And he comes over to me. He's like, hey, do you need a fan? I was like, what? He's like, yeah, I have 2 fans I need to get rid of. And I'm like, no, I don't need a fan. He's like, well, I kind of really need him to be taken. And I was like, okay, where are they? And he points to like this freaking pile of rubble and garbage.
Yeah.
And um I'm just like, I don't see a fan over there. And I'm just like, what's going on here? So I just thought, I'm like, no, I just need the cabinets. I'm sorry, man. He's like, well, he's like, I got other stuff inside. And it was at this kind of rundown, rinky dink iglesia church.
Okay.
And he's like, well, I got some furniture in there that needs to go, and the other fans in there. And I'm like, yeah. I was like, well, if you make another post and just say, I have this free stuff, as long as you remove it, you can have it. I've seen people post that shouldn't have a problem getting somebody to help you out. And he's like, no, I really need. Well, if you want the cabinets, I'm gonna need you to take the other stuff. Otherwise, I'm not gonna let you take the cabinets. And I was like, what? I was like, are you serious, man? And he's like, yeah, I can't. He's like, unless you go inside, bring that stuff out, or take it with you, then I'm not gonna let you have the cabinets. And I was just like, at that point, I just lost it. I told the guy where he can go politely, and I took off basically. But I was
Smart
thinking
man.
about afterwards, like the dude blocked my exit. Like he pulled his truck in after I went in the gate, kind of left it in the opening for the driveway, and then he was standing in the other portion, like blocking the gate. And he was trying to get me to go inside the whole time, which I didn't think about till afterward. But I mean, stranger danger, right? So it was probably nothing. I can't even visualize in my head how I got by him, but I had a dolly, so I think I just kind of like, and plus he saw me the rage monster coming out, so he just got out of the way. But I mean, what percentage chance do you think I was almost sold into like human trafficking slavery?
Um, I don't know, but I think this is greater than a 0% chance.
Yeah, I do
It just seems
too.
like a weird interaction. I
Yeah,
mean,
I did.
I
I do too.
I've Samantha's big on this true crime stuff, and so we'll
Mm.
listen to like some podcasts or watch a bunch of shows.
Tinder
And
swindler.
oh yeah, definitely. But yeah, like the stuff that this guy's doing, trying to get you to go inside the whole time, kind of changing the story and all that. Very weird, very suspect. So, I mean,
Yeah,
I would bet that it wasn't anything, but I do think there's a non-zero chance he was trying to do something.
yeah. I feel like at the minimum it was a shakedown. Like he was trying to get me to chip him off $50 or something for
Yeah,
cabinets that his wife was just trying to get rid of, and that she's probably tired telling his ass to do something about him. You know what I mean?
right.
And he's like, well, I'm not just gonna give him away. So, but I mean, at the other end of the spectrum is I was about to get put in a freaking dungeon under the glacier and
Yeah, I just think
put
I think
lotion
you
on my
made the right
skin.
decision to get out of there.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, in the moment, I just thought it was just the guy being an asshole, which it probably was. But oh, I forgot to mention the other thing. The other thing he said it didn't look like I deserved them. Like I didn't need them. They had to go to somebody that needs them.
That's weird.
Yeah, and I was like, what? Like you trying to like what's going on here, man? You trying to get like some
Yeah.
sort of favor here? Like I'm not gonna do that. I'm not gonna do that for some freaking $50 cabinets, bro.
Oh man. Yeah, it's a good thing you got out of there.
Yeah, I mean, if they had granite countertops, it might be another story. But I mean, these are just like run of the mill, and there was rat shit in the bottom of them. I mean, it was just a bad scene. So,
Yeah.
dude, but yeah. So anyway, I'm gonna be a little more leery of these Facebook Marketplace interactions.
Smart.
Do you have anything to that you would like to share before we get into the race summary for the Saudi Arabian Grand Prix?
I don't. It's getting warm here. Not really warm. It's like 50, 60 degrees, but it's better than the 20, 30 degrees it was a month or two ago. Um, so I'm living my life outside these days as much as I can. That's all I got.
Good deal. Good deal. All right. So, gonna go over the recap here of how the Formula One weekend transpired at Saudi Arabia. So, here we go. We stay in the Middle East for round 2 of the Formula One season as the teams and drivers head to the Jeddah street circuit in Saudi Arabia for the second time in the track's history. Last year's race took place less than 4 months ago at the end of a contentious title fight between Lewis Hamilton and Max Verstappen. If you recall, the race was marred by controversy when Verstappen ran off track and then was instructed by his team to allow Lewis to pass strategically. You can hear more about last season's drama by listening to our Drive to Survive episode recaps in our podcast feed and on YouTube. Although this trip to the Jeddah circuit is at the front end of the season this time around, there is no shortage of storylines and title implications. Let's get to the race weekend recap. An extraordinary situation developed immediately during the first practice session when a drone missile strike hit an Aramco oil
Aramco.
refinery 6 miles from the track. Yeah, I'm not joking. There was a missile strike that hit one of the sponsors of the race's oil refinery. Unsettling to say the least. Verstappen radioed telling his team he smelled something burning, wondering if it was his car. The unsettled teams continued through both practice sessions and then held meetings well into the night. Team principals voted unanimously to proceed with the race weekend, but the drivers were held themselves in their meeting, contemplating refusing to race on Sunday. Ultimately, one of the deciding factors in the show going on was that the teams would have to remain in Saudi Arabia until their scheduled flights on Monday. They were given reassurances of the Saudi air defense systems, instilling some level of confidence in their safety. Unsettled by the situation off the track, qualifying went ahead as scheduled on Saturday night. Both Nicholas Latifi, more about him later, and Mick Schumacher crashed in Q1 and Q2, respectively, with the Haas driver's accident being especially violent and destructive. Mick was pushing hard, challenging the midfield, and looked set to make his first Q3 before taking too much inside curb and throwing his car into the wall. A delay in showing Mick on screen was worrying, as it always is, but Mick was in good spirits afterward, despite his race weekend being over. Mercedes continued to struggle, with Hamilton failing to get out of Q1, despite what some Saudi fans showed on camera. You really do hate to see it for Hamilton and Mercedes. Q3 was probably the most competitive qualifying session since the last Bush administration, with 4 drivers having a shot at pole. In the end, it was the oft disrespected Mexican driver Sergio Perez putting his Red Bull on top ahead of previous race winner and pole sitter Charles Leclerc by just 0.02 of a second. The top 4 were separated by just 0.2. The Red Bull team had another gremlin pop up in the pre-race. Yuki Tsunoda's AlphaTauri could not complete its warm-up lap and would not start the race due to what they're calling drivetrain issue. For the rest of the grid, it was time for lights out. The start of the race, which can be especially unnerving on a street course, was very clean for the entire grid. Carlos Sainz did drop a position, seeming to be more focused on passing his teammate for second than defending Max Verstappen, who was behind him in fourth originally. Gasly lost 2 spots on the opening lap, while Hamilton carried on in 14th. His teammate George Russell made the first pass of the main teams, getting around Esteban Ocon's Alpine for 5th on lap 4. Alonso wasted no time attacking his teammate with some pink-on-pink crime. Starting lap 5, Ocon defended aggressively with a late inside block along the pit wall that kicked up some Saudi sand. The 2 Alpines dueled it out till lap 7, where Alonso went around the outside of turn 1. This continued into a 4-way battle between the 2 Alpines, Kevin Magnussen and Valtteri Bottas. At this time in the race, 6th through 9th, place were separated by 3 seconds for a couple of laps. providing some early race action. At the pointy end of the grid, Perez was settling in with a 2.5-second gap to Leclerc. The top four were evenly spaced ahead of the first round of pit stops. On lap 15, the nerds on the pit wall radioed. Here we go. I'm messing up here. On lap 15, the nerds on the pit wall and radio, there's two groups of nerds here, began to inject their influence into the race when Leclerc's team messaged his tires were healthier than Red Bull's. Shortly after, the message came into Leclerc, box to overtake. Red Bull took the bait or decided to block Leclerc's undercut attempt. Pitting on lap 16, the Ferrari opted to stay out for an overcut maneuver. Unfortunately, for the race-leading Perez, Nicholas Latifi, as he often does, put his Williams into the wall. This is the third time in as many race weekends he's brought out or he's caused an incident bringing out yellow flags and eventually a safety car in this case. More controversy emerged when Perez hit the pit lane exit behind Sainz in third, but refused to let Sainz by until after the race went green again. The grid held position at the restart. George Russell got around Magnussen to reclaim fifth, while his teammate Hamilton got around the lone Haas himself on lap 25 for sixth. Hamilton opted not to pit during the safety car thanks to selecting hard tires at the start of the race. The race settled in again with Verstappen lurking behind Leclerc to challenge for the lead of the race. Then on lap 36, durability issues struck the grid again. Alonso's Alpine overheated and eventually shut down, while Ricciardo's McLaren, who had been irrelevant up to this point, lost its drive. Both cars would stall out in the pit entry lane, closing the pits, throwing a spanner into Lewis's Hamilton's strategy when he wasn't able to pit during the safety car. With the virtual safety car being deployed, the gaps between the lead cars remain more or less the same. The race would restart on lap 40, setting up a 10-lap sprint to victory lane. Let's go racing. Max made his intentions known early, threatening Charles on the first lap after the restart. Charles set up Max for the Galaxy Brain move of letting Max ahead of him right in front of the DRS detection zone while working lap 42, and was able to retake the lead into turn one on lap 43. That cheeky lad, that Charles. The battle continued relentlessly as the pair played Lava Monster with the DRS detection zone on the next lap. Max flat spotted his tires, trying to avoid being ahead of Charles at the line in what was a bizarre act of racecraft. The flat spot would not hinder Max for long. He took the lead on lap 47, heading into turn one. That was Charles's turn in the game of cat and other cat. Approaching the penultimate lap, yellow flags were out in turn one for debris, thanks to an ill-fated lunge by Alex Albon's Williams on Lance Stroll's Aston Martin. This prevented Charles from attempting a pass, who was very much in striking range at the time. Max was able to hold off Charles at the line and take a well-fought win in Saudi Arabia, the first in his title defense of the season. Sainz took third, with Perez fourth. Next up on the calendar, the F1 circuit travels to Melbourne for the Australian Grand Prix on a revised circuit that should provide more passing opportunities. The battles resume in 2 weeks, with race day landing on April 9th. Locally, it'll be a late night and early Sunday morning for us in the U.S., making adult beverages a mandatory race staple. So, Jeff, that was the Saudi Arabian Grand Prix. What do you think, man? about the race as a whole. Was it enjoyable?
Yeah, I thought the race was a lot of fun. I still have questions around safety cars and some of the things about them, um, or virtual safety cars. Um, Lewis got a little unlucky. He comes around the final turn, and Ricardo's slowing down, like in the pit lane entrance. So Lewis decided not to cut over right to pit, even though his team had told him to, because I believe this probably had to do with a lot of people were referencing Monza 2020, I think it was, where he got a penalty for crossing the pit lane white line. Um, I have a feeling that may have been in his mind a little bit of not wanting to cross that line and potentially get a penalty and ruin his race. And his race got ruined anyway. It made no sense to me that like you had two cars stop in the pit lane. You had Alonso and Ricardo, and yet people were allowed to enter the pit lane, like Magnussen and Hulkenberg. Really confusing, um, especially because they shut it down like right after. Um, and granted, like Ricardo got out of the car and started pushing it, and they had to get them out of the way. But like when you have cars stop there, like that's a real easy call. Just shut down the pit lane. It just makes too much sense to be done. And the other safety car issue I had was Perez and Sainz. So Perez is clearly behind at the line, right? Wherever they determine that uh, there's no passing anymore or whatever. So Sainz comes out behind Perez just because he has to be on the pit lane side. Red Bull knows that. The stewards know that. The race director knows that. Yet they let Sainz stay behind Perez for like two or three safety car laps before Perez finally like the light goes green and then Perez lets him by. It makes absolutely no sense to me when everyone involved knows that Perez has to let him by. I understood why Red Bull did it. If you let him by, you know, Charles is in first, Max in second, and then Sainz would have been in third. Maybe he pushes Max a little bit, which lets Charles get away, type thing. I understood why Red Bull wanted to keep him behind. It made zero sense to me when everyone knew that Perez had to let Sainz pass at some point. They didn't just do it under the safety car. But yeah, I mean, other than those two questions, like I thought the race was great. I think there should probably be a conversation about Latifi at some point if he keeps crashing and all that, because you just can't keep having this kind of effect on races. Um, he kind of changed who the world champion was last year in a way. Granted, there needed to be some more help with that, but he was kind of what sparked it. And then, this year, as you said, this is his second or third, brush with the wall and, flags coming out and stuff like that. Like, it's just bad at this point. There's other
Yeah,
drivers that deserve to be there.
we'll get into Latifi for sure. Um,
Um,
Clearing up your questions about race control and how they handled that. I didn't see on video or on the feed when the other drivers were able to enter the pit. My feeling is they didn't initially close the pits. There is that line there. I mean, I don't know if the drivers who did pit before or even after or during the message was displayed that the pit lane entry was closed. I don't know if they went over that line. It's mainly so that cars racing don't cross that line that are going full speed. I could see where race control would be willing to overlook if it was partly obstructed and they crossed the line anyway. Um, where they wouldn't assess a penalty. And with the restart, I feel, I mean, I'm on the same side with you. They should have made Perez give back the position beforehand. We know how Red Bull handles these steward decisions, how they have a history, a proclivity to not abiding by them when it inconveniences them. I will say that usually during full race speed, they do give them kind of a window of time that they need to do that, and it's typically, you know, I think it's like 3 laps. I'm not sure what the rule book actually says, so I could see where Red Bull would have some wiggle room to keep their driver in front. So hopefully that's something that does get cleared up, because that was kind of, you know, not really to the spirit of what the race, how that restart should have happened. There's no, just like you said, there's no reason why Perez couldn't have let signs by before
It
before
also,
the restart.
yeah, I mean, my bigger issue with that whole thing is that it's basically Red Bull sacrificing Perez, which they've clearly shown they're more than happy to do. And not just with Perez, like I'm sure they've done this before he got there with their second driver to Max, right? But by not letting signs pass and telling Perez to let him do it after the restart, you're just hindering his race at that point, because he's going to let signs pass. And now it's almost impossible for him to retake that position. Whereas if he does it, you know, during the yellow, maybe on the restart, he gets a better start and he can take third from signs, you know, like that kind of thing. They just seem more than happy to use Perez to let Max get as high up as possible. I actually, I was excited to see Perez win the race, or at least see what happened, because he looked very comfortably in front. You know, Charles looked to be struggling to catch him. Not struggling to catch him, but like as you said, he was a solid 2.5 seconds back, and it seemed like that's where it was going to stay. You know, granted, uh, you know, the pit stops and all that, but it would have been interesting to see, had Max been able to figure out how to get to second with Perez in front, what they decide to do.
Yeah, when Max was told about Perez, he did say, "Oh, like he did sound genuinely disappointed." So
Right,
I think Red Bull was gonna let Sergio have this one since it's so early in the season, and he put his car on pole. So, you know, he earned it in their
right.
eyes. Latifi crashing. So yeah. I mean that gets us right into that. Um, he crashed during qualifying the day before, and he I mean I watched it, and it was bad. He's like, I don't know what happened. And then when he crashed this time, he basically said, hey, I'm not sure what the car did there. It's like, okay, man,
Yeah,
thanks.
it was rough. Like the crash in the race, right? He's on the last turn, and the back end clearly like goes wiggly on him, because it seems like he just hits the throttle too early. And it's just like, this seems fairly clear what happened, right? Like you
Yeah.
just tried to gas it and you lost the back end. Okay.
Yeah.
Like,
And I
don't
was
play dumb.
I was especially upset because I was pounding the table for Perez to that he was the play in DFS, because everybody wanted to pick Max. And I mean, first article kind of highlighted Perez, and he was making good on it. Leclerc was probably hanging back and would have challenged, but anyway, um, and then it just gets ruined by
Yeah.
Latifi. So Latifi's fade on site now, because I had Hamilton. I had some pretty heavy Hamilton wagers last season, and so that's two bets that he's ruined for me. But these were heavy bets for me, and thinking I had an edge, and just the simulation and chaos, and Latifi being an agent of that is
Yeah.
disturbing. So
Um, there were a couple other things I wanted to bring up. Um, I know you touched on Yuki uh, and the drivetrain issue. If I were Red Bull, I would be very concerned. Uh, that's four issues with one with each of their cars now in two races this year.
yeah,
Um, I know Honda's still making everything and it's under the Red Bull powertrain name or whatever, but like, the Red Bull team seemed to figure out their fuel issue from the first race, but this is now four issues with four separate cars. There's something concerning, potentially concerning going on there.
for sure. And Gasly was way off the pace this weekend, which makes me think that they're turning the engine down. Yeah, because
Yeah,
he's usually up there pretty good, and he did okay in qualifying, where he wouldn't have to run for an extended period of time,
right.
possibly overheating the car. But during the race, you gotta, you know, you gotta control, so you can reach the end. And he was just not to where he normally is. I mean, that does kind of transition to my hypothesis that that it's the fuel. We did
Yeah.
see, because now we've seen problems for all teams, or all engines. So Bottas, the Ferrari engine, had to retire his car. Sonoda in the warm-ups, Ricardo um, had an issue as well, and so did Fernando Alonso.
Yeah.
So, I mean, to me, that uh, I mean, it does seem like the rebel teams are having more problems than others, but we have seen that affect all the teams, which leads me to believe it's the fuel. And they have said that the
Yeah.
fuel gets hot, and that's just going to affect everything. It's going to make these other systems fail, because the fuel is what drives the car. So
Right.
that's just
Um,
a theory.
oh no, it makes total sense. And since you brought up engines and all that, I will say I think this isn't the most representative all the time. And if you look at like how the race happened, Mercedes still didn't have a particularly great race engine wise, but five of the top 10 fastest cars in the race were Mercedes engines, and two of the top three.
Mhm.
Um, Max hit the highest top speed at 334 kilometers per hour. Lewis and Albon were at 332. Um, so like I think some of the engine talk might be a little overblown in terms of
Mhm.
like them being, they may not have the huge advantage that they used to have, but I don't think they're behind necessarily, if that makes sense. I just don't think the engine is good enough to cover up for the aerodynamic failures anymore.
Yeah. I'm kind of wondering, the race didn't stay green the whole time. We probably had around 10 laps of slow running with either a virtual safety car or a true safety car. So that, I mean, that's 20% of the race. I'm
Yeah,
curious if that helped some of these teams be able to run more laps at lap power, and we didn't really get to see, like we did in Bahrain, how Ferrari engine seemed to have an advantage. But it's too early to tell. It's not a big sample size. It's just
right.
interesting that we had the two retirements from two different um manufacturers, two different
Wasn't it three?
teams.
Or
No, it
really,
was
all
it was
four had a
Ricardo.
retirement.
Well, Bottas, yeah, I guess Bottas, he pulled it. I guess, yeah, Bottas did kind of crap out around the same time as the other two, but he was able to get his car in the pit. So, yeah, that's
Yeah.
probably why it just doesn't stand out as much to me. But you're right, we did have three um
Well,
effect,
because,
or what were retirements around the same time in the race.
yeah. And then, yeah, it was all, that was really weird that it happened at the same time in the race. That also makes me think that it might be the fuel, that like it gets to a certain temperature or whatever, and
Hmm.
it takes a certain amount of time to get there kind of thing. Um, Because yeah, Valtteri just basically said he had the same issue, right?
Yeah, and at the Bottas was actually just looking at my race notes here. Bottas was hounding Alonso and looked like he was going to go for a pass for him on lap 32. And then watching the race, all of a sudden he was like 4 seconds off of Alonso, like a lap or two later, and I was like, "Huh, what happened there?"
Yeah,
And then yeah, he ended up pulling into the pits after after Alonso and Ricardo had their problems. So yeah,
yeah,
and the thing is, the teams won't tell us what the
right,
real thing is. Them saying a drivetrain is like saying, "Oh, it's a freaking lower body issue," or
right.
something.
Yeah, the only way I think we really find out anything, like if it's actually the fuels, when all the teams come out and say, yeah, we need to go back to the old fuel or something, right? Like they would all have to band together, but like we're not going to hear what actually happens.
No.
I did want to get your thoughts early in the race. I know it provided a lot of entertainment for everyone. The Alpine battle, right, between Ocon and Alonso.
Hmm.
And my question is, I know they interviewed Otmar, the team principal, at the time the battle was going on. He's like, "Oh, I'm not worried about it. You know, we'll let them battle." But I remember watching the race. Ocon and Alonso were both like almost within DRS range of George in that like fifth, sixth battle. And then Ocon and Alonso started battling each other and immediately fell back to like 6, 7 seconds off of George.
Yeah,
You
I
know, it's
think
like,
so. You gotta manage the personalities of your team, and Alonso wants to he never wants to be behind his teammates. So, and
right.
then Ocon wants to establish himself. Alpine's not going to win the title. They do have a chance at competing with Mercedes for third, or McLaren, AlphaTauri, Alfa Romeo, for fourth. Um, at this point in the season, I'm sure they have the conversation with the drivers. Like, do you guys want us to do strategy? Do you guys want to race each other? And naturally, they're going to say, we want to race each other. And they say, all right, you got to freaking keep it clean. You can do it
Yeah.
for a few laps, which I believe is what the Andy Reid of the NFL, or of Formula One. That's the guy that in Drive to Survive, when they asked him to do a James Bond pose, he said, "No, I'm too fat. Like, what are you?" Anyway, so I can't think of his name, but yeah,
Otmar.
he's
Yeah.
yeah, he's a cool dude. He says, "Yeah, I mean, we're gonna let him race for a bit, and you'll see once they get the message to cut it out, they'll settle in." So if there were to be an accident, I could see them going back to the drivers and saying, "All right, like, you guys, we said we were going to let you race. Don't crash into each other. You crashed into each other. So now it's going to be team orders." And then Alonso won't listen to it. And probably neither will Ocon, but at least they'll,
At
be
least
able to
they'll
take,
attempt.
like, yeah. And they'll say, like, here, I mean, here's your freaking contracts. We can't, so it's not what the team wants. I'm sure the team is just trying to manage the personalities and letting the drivers race. So it's like a necessary evil type
Yeah.
thing.
Oh
So
yeah, I got that. I just thought it was interesting because, like, for me, you know, at the time Alonso seemed faster. If I were Alpine, I would have just said, "Hey, Ocon, let Alonso pass. You know, try to like stay within DRS range and let him drag you along, and try to go get George together." Because I thought George was within striking range, and you know, then they start fighting with each other, and George just pulled away, and they never got close again. Really, you know.
right, right. I agree with you. I'm sure they
But
have race engineers discussing that afterwards and will implement a strategy moving forward that the drivers
yeah,
will ignore. But That's racing. That's what makes it fun. And Jensen Button was even surprised. He was like, "Thank you so much." Like you could just tell by the tone of his voice. He's like, "We really doing this? Okay, like let's get weird." So, um, obviously the biggest thing about the race was, I mean, we had a true race battle in the final 10 laps for the win of the race, which, I mean, we were spoiled last season with how it went, but that just doesn't happen. It just hasn't happened for a while. So clearly the new rules, the new specifications of the cars is allowing for drivers to challenge, where maybe unfortunately to some that maybe the following driver has the advantage. I mean, hopefully they can play around with the DRS detection zones and maybe close down where you can deploy it, because I mean the Lava Monster DRS detection line was was kind of comical. Um,
I thought it was awesome personally. I'm a fan of essentially instituting Mario Kart rules a little bit in that not completely obviously like the better teams and the better racers should win, but I think if you can I do like the 1 second rule, kind of like if you can get within a second, um you get a little bit of help, because I think it makes it a lot more fun when you see passes and stuff.
right.
um so I am a fan of that because we do want it to be entertaining, right? Like that's kind of the point of the new regulation changes as well, is to make it more entertaining and more watchable, and not just have someone drive off 30 seconds into the distance. Um, but yeah, I actually really liked it. I know that it could be really unsafe though, what happened, because let's say Max had stayed behind Charles and Charles was trying to do that. It's not a great situation, although I don't think Charles would if Max stayed behind him.
Mhm.
But one thing I saw get recommended was moving the detection zone to after the turn instead of in front of it. That way, like, there's no incentive, because if you try to brake and the person just goes through, even if you get DRS, it might help you like not completely lose touch, but you're not gonna overtake, right? Like,
Yeah.
um, so yeah, I mean, I think there's ways to play with it, but I actually really enjoy it. I like giving that person that's behind a little bit of a boost or a little bit of an advantage, because it does make the racing more fun, in my opinion.
Yeah, I agree. F1 has been trying to get this right for a while,
Right.
since they introduced the Kers and the DRS flaps. So, I mean, it's great that we finally. It looks like we have, if not 100% perfect, it's at least in the 90s. Yeah, just the whole way that it unfolded, and the way that the broadcast is using the head cam or the helmet cam to show the chase. I mean, it's just, I can't believe it.
Yeah.
It's great. I've been watching for a long time, and I mean, before it used to just be me posting into oblivion on Facebook, like, "Hey guys, Monaco, like, check out Monaco. The track's cool. The race would be boring as shit,
Qualifying's
but
awesome.
at least there's that." And then Spa, like, it was two Facebook posts a year that maybe got 2 likes about the race. So
Yeah.
I feel like literally the Andy Dufresne from Shawshank Redemption. Like I crawled through freaking 2 miles of shit with with the step nosed Formula One cars, the freaking HRT and Marussia teams, and yeah. So to be where we're at right now is amazing. Um, so you did mention the Charles and Max battle. We have 2 races now where Max has kind of kept a cool head about him and kept things clean. We have Red Bull doing. I mean, they were all over the post race. They had Adrian Newey doing interviews, which I haven't seen before. Like, I don't really understand what's going on with this nice guy Red Bull movement. I'm not a fan. I see through it. We had freaking Helmut Marko making a less than not racist. I think the logic on that sentence checks out. A less than not racist comment about how being in Saudi Arabia with missiles is just like, it's no different than living in Mexico City, which his Mexican driver Sergio Perez, I'm sure, should be accustomed to. um, but yeah, I'm just not buying it with Red Bull. I don't have much else to say, but I just, this battle where Max has kept his nose clean so far. Typically what happens is, yeah, you guys keep it clean, and then somebody gets a little desperate. Maybe Max loses 2 races. And then, then you put the foot down, and then we'll have it won't be so complimentary. Like, Charles is going to be giving Max a thumbs up after running them off the track
Right.
mid-season.
Yeah.
you know
I do think it's a completely different dynamic than Max versus Lewis. Lewis has been a giant ever since Max entered the sport, right? Like, Max has been there. This is what, year 7 or 8, and Lewis has won like 5 titles in that time or something.
mm-hmm.
Going against Lewis, also for Red Bull in general, like, Red Bull was the giants, and then the last changes to the sport, and then Mercedes has dominated for 8 years. And I think last year there was just a lot of tension because Red Bulls wanted to get back to that number 1 spot. Max wanted that title, and Mercedes had all of it. I just think there was like a lot of like that punching up, like, oh, we've got to do everything we can. And then towards the end of the season, there was the desperation of like, their car's better, we got to do whatever we can to like block it off, kind of thing, and not let them pass. This year it's early in the season. Even Hamilton and Verstappen last year were fairly cordial early in the season when they would race against each other. It
Yeah.
wasn't crazy. It wasn't until mid-season that it got crazy.
Yeah.
Also the rules changed, right? Like, you can't run somebody off the track anymore this year. Like, it's literally a rule now. So,
Another Max Verstappen rule. Dude's out
yeah, like
2.
the rule is that you have to leave a car's width or whatever, right? So, I think there's a lot of things going on. I also think that the relationship between Charles and Max, I don't think the relationship between Max and Lewis is bad the way people like kind of want to think it is. Like, they both seem very respectful of each other. Even though they can be kind of petty with each other, but they do respect the hell out of each other. But as has been mentioned many, many times, Charles and Max have sort of grown up together in karting and stuff, and raced a lot against each other. They know how to race against each other. And I also think too, like, from Max's perspective, Charles isn't afraid of him. Charles has crashed with him before. Like, neither one of them is going to back out. I think that it being early in the season, some of the rules changing, and the fact that it's a different history with a different driver has contributed to this. They also like each other more than I think Max and Lewis do. But I think it will be very interesting. And I think the dynamic will definitely change if Merck figure it out. And
Mm-hmm.
then I think, when you're just fighting with one other person to get the win, I think it's easier to be cordial in a way. You throw a third person in there, now I think it's a little more cutthroat. But I think it'll stay like this for a while at least. I don't see it going crazy, until the championship's actually on the line.
I heard this same thing about Hamilton and Rosberg, who were besties in karting, which they were, and then title fight ensued. Next thing you know, Hamilton's throwing his hat at Nico.
Right.
So we'll see. I mean, there's no way of knowing. Different situation. They were teammates, so they at the time, but yeah, just it'll hopefully either way it's entertaining, and I would expect it is based on the how the first two races have
Yeah,
gone down. Um, I was gonna briefly touch on the Schumacher crash and maybe the track being too dangerous, but we're running a little long, so I'll skip over that. I do want to talk about the freaking missile strike. I mean, what are? Well, I mean, I was on the social saying get them out of there now. This is super dangerous. Which I mean, everybody's posting memes about rain in Spa being more dangerous than a missile strike in Saudi Arabia. What are your overall thoughts on what happened with the off the track and the oil refinery being
yeah.
blown to
So
bits?
I think my initial thought is that they should have stopped and left immediately. Um, had that been an option. From my understanding and things I've read and seen tweeted, I don't think that was an option. Not that they were being, held hostage and weren't going to be allowed to leave, but from my understanding, they were told that they, whether they raced or not, they weren't leaving till Monday. For whatever reason. That's when their flights were scheduled or whatever. I don't know anything around that other than that's what I read that they were told. I was also, it seems implied very heavily that none of the drivers wanted to race immediately. It seems very much like they were unanimous and had to be convinced. I think that, had I been in this situation, I probably would not have wanted to race immediately. If you're told you're there till Monday, no matter what, what's the harm in racing at that point?
Right.
You're, you know what I mean? So I think I can understand why they ultimately decided to, because like if you can't leave, well, might as well be there and do what you're supposed to do anyway. And then when you leave, have serious conversations of never going back.
Yeah.
That's basically it.
Yeah. Um, I think I was trapped a little bit by that quote about there was part of the deciding factor was how quickly they would be able to leave the country. I mean, to
Yeah,
me, it does sound like that's some sort of words were said like, well, you're not going to be able to leave. I saw one person tweet that the implication was that Saudi Arabian officials would not let planes containing Formula One staff leave. Hearing or reading the actual article itself and hearing from, I think it was Bottas who had an interview, it just was the way you explained it that there can't be new flights scheduled, so they would just have to hang around anyway. So the the fact that they weren't racing, although may have been symbolic, wouldn't have changed their safety, their level of safety, you know.
right.
So so yeah, I mean I was kind of trapped into that, but I'm glad that it was kind of clarified. What you said though about maybe not continuing to go Saudi Arabia, that was my initial thought too. I've heard the opinion that the F1 Formula One is trying to earn some diversity badge by going to these countries, which I don't think it is. However, I do see it from the perspective they're looking to make money. Obviously, this is a market that is not, has not been oversaturated by other sports leagues and such. So I don't know what the balance is. I don't know what the answer is, but I mean, where do you think Formula One's responsibility lies into this, because I can see an argument being made that events like this going into countries that have been kind of on the fringe of being involved in sports, and the big powers of the world, where you go, you have like freaking CEOs from companies go check out a Formula One race in this new emerging market. Maybe they bring more businesses, and it kind of uplifts the lives of the middle class who have been feuding for a while. But at the same time, you see the risk in doing it because of the conflict that's been going on there for a while. And nothing more evident of that than a missile strike. You're putting I mean, it looks like an American company is going to these dangerous places just for money, but there is maybe a social benefit in the long run. So I don't know what the answer is. I'm just curious if you have any thoughts on all that. I guess my question would be, is it worth it? Is it worth going there for the possible benefit, kind of putting aside Formula One's profits? Or do you think maybe they should just stay in NATO countries?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's tough because like if you stop going to countries because they are in wars or commit war crimes or stuff like that, like then there's not many countries that are available to you to actually race in at that point.
Yeah, it's all
Um,
about
I
who's drawing the line.
Yeah, I think that at a certain point you have to draw a line. Like if there's an active battle going on or
Mhm.
active fighting going on, I think you need to avoid those places. But, like you said, I do think there are some, even though they built the track in Jeddah with extremely questionable labor, from my understanding, um, I do think there is the point to be made. Like, and we see this in America, that sporting events tend to bring in more money for the businesses around the sporting event, not just the event itself. And when you do that, you generally bring in more money to the average person as well, in a way, right?
Mhm.
So, I do think there is the argument that
Think
going to
about the
these places,
jobs. The jobs.
I mean, kind of, but I think the schedule needs to be a little more flexible in the sense of like if something is actively happening, you need to be able to cancel that race and replace it with another one, if that makes sense. Because like just like they're doing in Russia this year, now it's a little bit different situation, obviously, but you
Right.
canceled the Russian Grand Prix now, even though it was on the schedule.
Yeah, and
Um,
it was on the schedule despite the fact that they had invaded Crimea, and had been
right,
engaged in that conflict. Lesser scale, still something going
right.
on.
I also think too it depends on how close it is. Like now, I don't know the Saudi Arabia region all that well. I don't know their fight all that well, so I don't know where a lot of that has been happening. If it's happening near where the track is, I think you definitely have to avoid it. If it's happening nowhere near the track and like on the other side of the country, I think there's a little more reason to go still, if that makes sense. I mean, I think the chance of a race being attacked is almost zero because let's say I forget who the Saudi Arabians are fighting with right now. I think it's Yemen or whatever. Let's say they
Mhm.
had attacked the track and killed drivers, right, or team members and stuff. Well, now they're probably not just fighting with Saudi Arabia. They've
Right,
probably fighting with some big name countries at that point. And
right.
I don't think they want that. They may have wanted to make a statement, which is, I'm assuming, why they attacked close to the track. But I don't know. I'm not for supporting these like dictators, but every culture is different. Every country is different. The people in those countries are, may accept certain things and may want to live a certain way. And it's not on us to judge that necessarily. Now, I don't necessarily think people want to live under a dictator all the time and stuff like that. Um, but yeah, I mean, I just think it's really tough when you're judging other countries and whether or not to do something there type thing. I don't know if that's in a business's uh, set of like guidelines, like, oh, I guess if you don't like what that country's doing, don't go there and support it. But at the same
Yeah.
time, like, you're F1 and you're trying to make a whole lot of money. It's what war they're in or what they're fighting isn't necessarily your opinion. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, maybe the solution is just Formula One writing stuff into their contracts. Like,
yeah,
you know, if we run a Twitter poll and all the freaking neckbeards with their egg profile pictures vote that we shouldn't race there, then we're not going to race there, and we're not liable to any of the terms of the contract or some bullshit like that. But
yeah,
obviously, it's not true. But I mean, it's something they need to consider. Again, I don't know what the answer is, but I just do think there is some merit for Formula One to try to have some influence or some something in these countries, because unlike the Olympics, which or the World Cup, which is a one-time thing, Formula One, we can obviously the races can continue to go on for some period of time, and hopefully, make for a better situation of the everyday
yeah.
citizen in these countries. There was one more point I was going to make that is slipping my mind, so I think we're just going to move on. You want to talk a little NFL before getting out of here? I know we're running a little long.
I gotta go. I got a meeting that's starting in a minute or two.
Okay, well, while you skedaddle out of here, I will just touch on the NFL. So, thank you, Jeff, for all your
Thank
time,
you.
and yeah, we'll see you next week.
See ya.
All right, so I just wanted to briefly touch on some NFL stuff. We had Tyreek Hill being traded to Miami because Kansas City didn't want to pay him. Essentially, we had Deshaun Watson's comments about always being hands on with the community of Houston. That's just cringe, but what can you do? I kind of have a theory that Tom Brady might go to Miami. He wasn't getting along with Bruce Arians. He seems to burn bridges with coaches lately, which is odd. And anyway, you have the new head coach there. I think it's Mike McDaniel, who is from the Niners. Tom Brady had been kind of rumored to be joining the Niners. So yeah, I mean, I wouldn't say it's guaranteed. It's just like the tea leaves are kind of there that that Brady might be setting up for a move to Miami, which would make it even more crazy. I just think I don't know. I just detect something fishy going on with the retire unretire, trying to get leverage on something. So yeah, and I mean he would be in division to go against Bill Belichick, which yeah, it just seems like there's some bad blood between Brady and New England. So, and what better way to exert that than by going to Miami, using Tyreek Hill and Waddle and a new hotshot OC to wreck shop. That'd be something, and then we get more tweets about the AFC being stacked. So that'd be fun. So those were just some initial thoughts, but But yeah, I mean, the NFL has been crazy. We got the draft coming up, so I'm excited for that. All right, that's going to wrap up this episode. Don't forget to follow us on Twitter at FC Wine Mixer. Subscribe to our YouTube channel or subscribe to our podcast feed anywhere you get podcasts. Thank you for listening. Time to get some pumpernickel. Toodaloo!